has a monopoly on the truth. Our version of our own truths are based on our own lived experiences. In this space, we welcome different perspectives to learn, unlearn, and enlighten. Welcome to The Lantern. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Lantern Podcast. On today's episode, I'm so excited to be joined by Danika Farrar. I didn't even ask you how to say your surname. That is right, Farrar, right?
Farrar, yes.
Okay. Oof. I guess I should have asked that offline, but it's fine. It shows that it's an authentic it's an authentic episode already. Danika is a qualified life coach. However, she's done a whole bunch of things in her life that have led her to qualify as a life coach. So I'm going to hand over to you. Introduce yourself to the audience, and you can start with wherever you want to in your life story, what drew you to life coaching, what you've done so far. You can start anywhere.
Okay, perfect. So I'd say I started off in the events and media world after leaving school, and then I'd say about 6-7 years down the line, I realized that my passion lies within mental health and helping people. And I decided to then get qualified as a life coach and a NLP practitioner, which is neuro linguistic programming, along with business coaching. However, with all of that, I decided to mainly focus on the mental health side of things. So with life coaching, it's very broad, but with the NLP and the business coaching, it's leans more on the side of mental health. So with the business coaching, I'd say I look at more helping people, that are stuck in work environments that aren't going well. What are the next steps? Mainly bad working environments, because I see that quite a lot, where people are struggling, with the people that they work with, or just the dynamic within the work environment. There seems to be still things like bullying, which you wouldn't think there is, but there is, and just bad dynamics. So a lot of what I do is focus on mental health. However, with coaching, like I say, it's everything. Mainly listening to people and then guiding them what their next steps will be and how to reach their goals and all of that kind of thing.
I love the fact that you basically spoke about coaching being a very wide umbrella, because I think it's an important departure point for the conversation. And having those tangible outcomes, as you speak of, as in like I do business coaching or I do NLP, I think like having that is so good because there are obviously like coaching is an unregulated industry, which makes it, I think it's a gray area for people that maybe don't necessarily understand it. So do you maybe want to walk us through what NLP is? Because our mental health and wellness ambassador, Avni, is also qualified in NLP. So can you tell us what exactly that is for people that have never heard of it?
So NLP focuses mainly on communication and behavioral patterns. So basically, the client will discuss what the issues are, and we will look at how we can change their thought patterns. A lot of people get stuck in negative thought patterns. So this is a way of using communication to change those thought patterns and the outcome. Because once you obviously change the way that you are thinking, that then changes your reality. So people get stuck in these loops, these thought patterns. And the more you ruminate on those certain things, the more you get stuck in a negative way. So once you are able to talk about that and then get a more neutral perspective, once the thought leaves the mind and you then speak about it, automatically you then have another perspective on it. Then, along with your coach giving you their perspective and asking the right questions, that then allows you to kind of deal with that thought or that process, and then you move on how to actually move to the next step to get past whatever it is that you're trying to deal with. So it's basically taking techniques and communication and behavioral patterns, and working with all three of those to get a different outcome.
I really love that. Seize the Light is all about democratizing access to holistic well-being. So obviously for yourself, I know you're a coach, you're very pricey. Can you maybe give us an example of maybe one negative thought a person may have and how they could reframe that thought? Like, how does that actually work? Talk us through, an example maybe of how you've helped somebody move through one negative thought or reframe it.
I'll go light on this one because I mean, there's so many different things I can talk about.
Yeah.
But I'd say, one of the smallest things that can actually change is, I find a lot of people struggle with confidence, and I know that's like a huge issue. And I feel like a lot of people think, well, I'm going to wait until like I feel ready to do this. And I mean, I think we
Yeah.
all have that thought process. Okay, well, I don't feel ready to do it now, but maybe if I give it a bit of time and I think about it more, I'm going to feel, better about it. But I think that is exactly what is holding everyone back, is more so focusing on the fear part of it. And the only way to actually build confidence is to be brave and do something once. And how you build that confidence is once you've done it once, you then keep doing it. And that's how you get better at it. And I think people don't understand that the confidence isn't going to come to you. You have to do it first, be brave, and then you can start getting better at something. And I think that's
Yeah.
actually the fundamental thing that's holding a lot of people back. Is I just think, well, I'm going to wait. I'm sure I'll feel better about it. But you have to actually just jump. You have to do it. And then you can then keep doing it to get better at it. So I think that's a lot of the time what people struggle with. And also, I'm trying to think, there's quite a few things that, yeah, I'd have to come back and think about that one more. But there's a lot of different things that people are more commonly struggling with at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can come back to that one. I'll think more on that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that that's good enough for you to share because obviously confidence is actually so broad, right? So you saying the one word, but it can be it looks different to different people. So I understand why it's a bit difficult getting into the granularity of it. But I think at some level, everybody struggles with confidence because it's exactly what you say. If you haven't done something before, you're not going to be confident. But also, confidence is built by doing things that you're not familiar with doing, overcoming that fear. That's how you build confidence as a person. So, I think at this point, I'd love to ask in my experience and in my view, I think that a lot of this coaching, self-help, personal development is left for people to learn later on in life, which I don't really understand who made that rule. To me, it almost seems like people have this crisis at like 40, 50, and then they're like, actually, I need help. I need to go speak to somebody. Whereas to my mind, I think, what if we had life coaching at like primary school level, where as a young child, before, your prefrontal cortex is fully developed, before 26, you have these sessions where you understand, I have a negative thought. This is how I reframe it into a positive thought. Why do you think we kind of leave? And I agree with you, it's definitely a mental health issue. Hence why I'm going to say, why do we leave this mental health issue all the way up until we hit a crisis?
Look, I think it's been a very taboo thing for a long time. I'd say since COVID hit, I don't think we were taking it as seriously. And I think since COVID, it's now not so taboo anymore. Everyone has jumped on the bandwagon. We have to take care of ourselves because we've been through a major world crisis. So I think, when it was taboo, everyone deals with issues, but I think no one wants anyone else to think they're dealing with issues. So we all kind of dealing with issues and we're all keeping it to ourselves. And I think the reason COVID made it less taboo is because now everyone as a world is dealing with basically the same issue. And that's, I think, how now it's okay to speak out about your issues. And I think it might be the same thing in school is, let's take life orientation as a subject. I personally think that that should have more of basic things that we need, life skills that we need. I mean, besides for even coaching, I think it should have had, how to buy your first home, how to do your own tax, how there's many things that they leave out, but most of all, the mental health thing should be part of that subject. I want to go further into doing seminars on bullying at primary schools and high schools because I think it's very important. I don't think there's enough
Yeah.
information about that. And I think once the children become aware of where bullying comes from and that the bully itself is actually more insecure than the person being bullied, it changes the whole
Yeah.
perspective of how kids view it. And I think it's a very important thing, because it's such a negative thing at schools and it's so prominent everywhere. I mean, the amount of damage that bullying has done, I don't understand how there isn't more awareness on that and more help at the schools for that kind of situation.
I absolutely agree with you. And the sad reality in this world is that the child bully becomes the adult bully because that behavior, it get exacerbated. They become the narcissist, and then we get surprised. So that's one of the things that I always look at in the mental health timeline, as I'd like to call it, is you don't just start becoming a bully in the workplace. I think if we studied this person's life, we would see it's either they got significantly bullied when they were younger and obviously haven't healed the inner child and then become the bully in the workplace. But my I was going to say annoyance, but I'm like it's a strong word to use. But what I also don't like is, yeah, it is the lack of education around things like bullying, around understanding the context, the bully, the perpetrator, the victim, the bystanders. Because it's one thing that I also educate on is that as a bystander, you are equally affected by the event. You're not at primary school watching a kid get bullied and thinking you're not getting affected. You actually are, because
Mm.
by osmosis, you become an adult that doesn't stand up for people when they get bullied because your inner child didn't do it. How do you then think you would then do it in the workplace? So this is where I think we find ourselves and the rot that is currently happening and perpetuating in society.
No, I definitely agree with you there. And it's a classic case of hurt people hurt people. If you don't heal from what is done to you, you then go and project that onto someone else. So I definitely see, how that works, well, ties into bullying.
But do you think, at an academic level, well, I should rephrase the question and ask, what do you think is the impediment in teaching younger kids about bullying, for example? Because I think I've seen good teachers who are able to sort of break the concepts down and then be more understood at a younger level. Because obviously you tailor the subject matter according to the age group that you're teaching. So it's a subject that can easily be tailored to a young audience. But why do you think, in your view, maybe in your experience, there's a impediment to actually implementing these formal concepts in academia?
You know what it is? I think, firstly, it needs to come from the right person. I mean, yes, a teacher can do it, but I think that maybe there's not enough background knowledge as into how to get this message across to the kids. A teacher's simply going to lay out a few of the fundamental reasons as to why it's happening and why it shouldn't happen. But I think you need someone to go deeper, someone that is a child psychologist or a life coach or a normal psychologist or anything. I think the way that the message is delivered and how it's broken down to the kids, you basically have to, how do I, you basically need to get to the point where you can get the kids to see the other side of the actual bully so that it no longer has the weight that it carries. Like if you break it down to them that this kid is doing this for whatever reason they're doing it for, you can then get a part of empathy from that side of it. Like, okay, so this kid might be going through a hard time and not getting the attention that they need at home, and therefore they're
Mm.
trying to get it in a negative way at school. You know, when you start seeing the empathy behind it and you break it down and you see that it's actually a form of insecure, not a form of a high level of confidence, therefore
Yeah.
both parties, you know, it kind of just breaks the whole situation. It no longer carries that weight anymore. So I think it's how you deliver it, where it's coming from, you know, those kind of things matter, you know, because I mean, we can all get told, yeah, no, bullying's a bad thing, don't do it. But kids need to understand more than that in order for them to process it correctly and not do it, or understand where it's coming from so it doesn't carry that kind of weight.
I definitely agree with everything you've said, and it does depend on who's driving it. And it's not. I don't want to. I think the word quality is wrong, but it's not necessarily a quality issue. But I think it's maybe having the heart and maybe the concern and care to deliver the message in a certain way. And I think in most of the mental health space, you probably find people that they champion things that they're passionate about, that they've been through. There's different types of experts, like lived experience experts that have actually gone through a circumstance and have thought, wow, that's really difficult. I want to help other people circumvent going through that, or help people who are currently going through that get to the other side. Then there's thought leader experts who, by studying, have then become experts in their field. And then there's intersectional experts that have a mix of the two. So I wonder, what's your view in these boxes, I would like to call them, around being a lived experience expert versus being a subject matter expert, or a thought leader versus being an intersectional expert? What's your view on that, particularly around mental health and the coaching and life coaching space?
Well, in my personal experience, I think it's definitely been a bit of, you know, life experience along with the passion, you know, for helping people and mental health, and then along with being qualified and actually having the experience with my clients. So I think it's an all round for me. But I mean, you definitely would get people, you know, that would go say, okay, I'm going to go into psychology or life coaching, get qualified, and then do it. And then you also get some certain life coaches that aren't even qualified; they just practice. So I think, you know, it's a very broad thing, and I think it actually boils down more so to the clients and what they are seeking. You know, I don't. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I think my whole life I've actually been passionate about mental health and psychology. And then through everything I did, it kind of just led me to, okay, I'm going to, life coaching is the one. So I think
Yeah.
it's, everyone's story is very different in that sense. But on my side, I definitely say it's part life experience and mostly passion, you know, drawn together to, that led me to life coaching. But yeah, I think more on that subject, it's a difficult one because it's not like psychology where you have to have certain qualifications, end of story. You know, life coaching is definitely broader as to how you get there, how you get qualified, and how you practice. So yeah, it's a much broader subject.
Yeah. I think for me, I've always been very attuned to personal development and someone who's always been really invested in getting better. So I think I was probably like a teenager reading like A Return to Love. I only figured this out now, that, okay, you've always been this person very much invested in like developing yourself and getting better, and, you know, cosmology and all these things that I worried about, and, you know, getting to know myself better and understanding the earth. And, you know, now back then, yes, it sounded woo woo, because I think, you know, as a young child, it's not necessarily things that you'd come across, but that's just, I think, always been who I've been. But for people that may look at, you know, personal development, life coaching, and even psychology as something that's too woo woo and abstract and something they can't necessarily relate to, how do you begin to break down the barriers and those more skeptical clients that come to you?
You know, I think it generally boils down to having, being open enough to talk, because at the end of the day, you know, with me, when I find like some certain clients don't necessarily want to open up off the bat, so it comes down to asking the right questions. And a lot of people think it's all about giving advice. It really isn't. The more important thing is asking the right questions, because if you can ask the right questions and make that person think, that opens so many doors, and they can get to the answer on their own if you ask the right questions. A lot of the time I'll ask questions that a person has literally never been asked in their life, and that opens a door
Yeah.
to a whole another universe they've never even thought about. And then, we dig deeper on that. And so I think it comes down more so to just asking the right questions, because when a person starts thinking about those things, then they start willing to open up about other things. And that's how you kind of navigate to the root issue. And then once you've gotten to the actual issue, then you work your way back up to, okay, how are we going to navigate around this issue to get to the outcome or the goal?
I hear you. And, I once came across something that said most of the people that are, doing these things or attending these courses are actually the people that don't need it, because they're going to these things or accessing these resources based on experiences that they've gone through, or hurt that they've endured. But the perpetrator, the bully, that person actually never seeks any personal development help, because they think that they're perfect, and they see their view of the world in a very linear way, so they don't necessarily see a problem. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you think, maybe on a societal level, do we address maybe having the wrong people, not necessarily the wrong, because I think everybody definitely should be working on themselves regardless, but
100%.
how do we get to a point where the people that may think that they're perfect and don't necessarily have to develop themselves access this kind of knowledge or become curious about it?
I think it's possibly, it's creating awareness. I think a lot of the time, if that person had to come across the correct information alone, it might make them think. It can't be like a public shaming. It can't be like a public thing. It needs to, and this is why social media, as much as it has its negatives, is actually can be a very positive thing. Because if that person is sitting alone at home and they come across, say, this a podcast or just a little reel on something, maybe narcissism or anything, and they start thinking, well, I'm portraying these symptoms, or I have these characteristics, or, I'm suffering with X, Y, and Z, and maybe that's the reason I've been behaving a certain way. Maybe they come to that conclusion on their own. There needs to be enough information out there, on both the issue and where you can get the desired help. So I think that's what it comes
Yeah.
down to, because other than that, I wouldn't it would have to be someone actually telling them directly, and that's never going to work well. So more, it's an awareness thing. It comes down to awareness at the end of the day, making that information available and for that person to become self-aware enough to say, I need help. But a lot of the time, that unfortunately is a very difficult thing. People don't necessarily want to be self-aware, and even if they are, it's about taking that step to want to get help.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you were saying now about self-awareness, and I was going to segue to ask, in circumstances where, let's say, somebody believes that they're self-aware, but let's say they're intellectualizing a lot of this, because I find with the people that I work with, they are extremely great at at intellectualizing mental health. Like, they understand it as a subject, but when it comes to the practical implementation, the sitting with oneself, getting to know, I think that's where they veer off. They would prefer that this was something that was like a, formal test of, write me 5 questions and then I'll tell you if I'm self-aware or not, and grade me based on how self-aware I am. I don't think they necessarily understand that there is no, it's not a test. This is the life journey. It's something that you're always going to be working towards. So, I mean, I guess in a long-winded way, asking the question around how can we stop intellectualizing these concepts and just get more practical and back into our bodies.
It's definitely, I think it's a personality thing because, like you say, a lot of people can be self aware, but they're not necessarily going to do anything about the issue. And then you get
Yeah.
people that just do. They don't sit and think about the issue, they just do the things. And I think a lot of people, and that's actually another thing that a lot of people are suffering majorly with, is procrastination. And then you've got to look at, like, is this just an issue because of an underlying issue, or is this an issue because of ADHD or ADD, which is another big thing that a lot of people are becoming more aware of now. Because back in the day, we used to look at ADHD as, okay, if the kid is hyperactive, we're going to get them tested. But then again, you get
Yeah.
boys mainly display the hyperactivity, and girls don't necessarily always display it that way. And so a lot of adults are now coming out with being diagnosed with ADHD and have realized that they've gone through their whole life feeling inadequate, that they don't fit in, and have been suffering with certain issues, but have been really good at certain things and have never understood that. And now, with being diagnosed, it's a good and a bad thing in a way, because you now know what you're dealing with, but then there's this grief of, had I known all this time,
Yeah.
would I've lived differently? Would I have felt, more like adequate or normal? Not that that's a thing, but you see, so I
Yeah.
think what it comes down to with being self aware and actually having the motivation to do something about it. I don't know if it's more of a personality thing, or if there's an underlying issue as to why a lot of people can be so self aware and not do anything. Some people, they know what the issues are, but they better off helping other people. And then you get people
Yeah.
that will just do, like, focus on themselves and actually fix the issues. So I think, yeah, that's something definitely to look further into as to why that happens a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm taking stock of in this conversation is there's still so much research and work that needs to be done in this space for us to really understand the human experience. And interestingly, when I talk about mental health, I think people don't even understand. We're still talking about mental health at a very reactionary level. We haven't even spoken about it at a preventative level, or even at a high performance level, because I don't even think we as humans are using our brains to their full capacity, right? We're stuck in survival mode. We're comfortable. We're procrastinating. So we haven't even experimented using the brain for high performance, for creativity, for innovation. Hence why I think the world is not even as advanced as it could be. So what's your view in maybe people's perception on mental health as it stands today, it being more of a reactionary, I think, consequence that something wrong has happened, and that's when I'm going to go and see the life coach, or my life has gone in a certain way, that's when I'm going to go and see somebody, versus life is going to be hard for everyone because this is what we've all chosen to do. I'm just going to have somebody walk side by side with me, and as and when I go through things, just have somebody to chat to. So, what would be your view on preventative versus reactionary mental health care?
So I think there's three parts to that. I'd say the main one is what has happened to you in childhood hasn't been dealt with, and how it's now affecting your adulthood, basically. So that's the main one, I think, where you haven't dealt with stuff that's happened in your childhood, and you've left it, and now you are dealing with the consequences as an adult. And then you have, obviously, something tragic happens to you, and now you've got PTSD from that, and you need to see someone. And then, yeah, you could say, just as wanting to better yourself, you go and see someone to help you with your goals, or maybe just to get you in a better mind space going forward to help you reach your next desired outcome. Um, Definitely, I'd say the majority is going to be the one where whatever happened to you in your childhood hasn't been dealt with properly, is now affecting you as an adult. I think that's the main thing, that, and this is why, you know what, it doesn't, you can't just say certain people need to see someone. I think mental health should be a standard thing, part of it should be, everyone should have access to it actually at no cost. It should be part of like
Yeah.
our medical aid schemes and those kind of things. It should be, in actually, no, it
Mm.
shouldn't even be that you need to pay for it. It should be something that every single person in the world has access to at any time because I think it's a necessity. And I don't
Yeah.
think just any one person needs to see someone. I think everyone does. So I think that's actually a main issue is a lot of the time people can't afford
Yeah.
to go and see someone, and that creates more of an issue.
Yeah, and I mean, this is, I mean, our mission and our goal, hence why we try and bring, experts like yourself on this platform just to talk to people because some people, they do want to get better, but maybe they can't afford to access the resources. And social media, yes, is great, but obviously you have to do a lot of sifting because there are people that are, doing it as a job, and that's fine. Everybody, it's capitalism. We understand everybody needs to get money and survive. And then there's people doing it out of genuine interest. So it's hard to sort of sift through who's genuine, who's not. And I find I've also had a conversation with people who've had bad experiences. They've worked with coaches and they've not gotten better. So I think then that's also distorted their perspective on things, and they were already not in a good place, and now they go and access the help, and now they're not. Nothing has changed for them. Whereas I agree with you. I think everyone should access it, but I find, as I say, like I was probably the woo teenager that was already like, there's nothing wrong. I'm just curious about myself, the world, my experience in relation to with everybody else. But I wasn't necessarily thinking there's something wrong with me mentally. Whereas I find like when I started this journey in speaking, people were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, why would I not be okay? Like, in my mind, it's like, it's either we who are like invested in personal development are not okay, and everybody else who's not is okay, or it's the other way around. But then you start to feel crazy as the person who's talking about all of these things. And I think that's been maybe society hasn't flipped the switch on
Hmm.
accessing these things is not crazy, it's normal, but the only way we can normalize it is having it in formal academic settings and everybody doing it at the same time, not just Danika going for a one-on-one with the child's you're the school psychologist, and then everybody knowing, because then that's shaming, that's that's making it such an individualistic experience. So there's so many things when it comes to this I could speak on about it being more of a collective experience and the accessibility, but it's something that is so vital, but it's so stigmatized. And I was very surprised because I journeyed out in 2022, and even in 2022, there is still such a stigma around these things. And that was my first time being public about me really liking personal development. And I mean, I don't think you know this about me because I think we've reconnected recently, but even around my yoga and my practices, those were things I also used to not, I wasn't hiding them necessarily, but I mean, if I'm not friendly with you, I'm not going to walk around the street saying, yeah, I do yoga, I do yoga. It's just something that I did for myself, and again, to get better, not because something is wrong, but I'm like thinking about high performance. But I don't know how we start to normalize these things because there's always going to be the cost element involved, unfortunately.
100%. I think it just boils down to, being curious enough to want to actually better yourself, and at the end of the day, say, take for instance, crying, if you, people often associate crying with weakness, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it actually takes strength to feel your emotions. So it's actually a person who won't cry or hasn't cried for years is actually a weaker person because they're not strong enough to allow themselves to sit with those emotions and actually feel them. So this is where you say it's double edged and it keeps getting flipped. People are looking at getting help, being emotional as a weakness, but it actually takes a lot of strength to feel those feelings, to sit with them, to want to get better, to dig up your past and actually deal with the things and find those root causes as to why you haven't gotten better or are still triggered by certain things.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you've said. I think it's such a great summary of my long-winded story. But it is just, I think, an experience of it's just a whole bunch of kids. We haven't necessarily grown up because your I think your adult form, nothing really changes much other than your physicality, but your emotional body is formed in your formative years, yet people don't know that. People just think I'm going to bury it down. I was bullied when I was a kid, and life gets busy, and that's one of the things that come up in all the research that we look at. People say they don't have time to access this, and that's the big impediment, because I've got work, I've got responsibilities, I don't have time to work on myself, yet you're bleeding on other people on a daily basis.
Yeah, it boils down to priorities at the end of the day. What do you want more? Do you want to get better? Do you want to heal? Do you want to be better for yourself and your family and your next partner? I think it definitely comes down to priorities. And yes, it definitely is always going to be easier to just you know, shove everything under the carpet and never think about it. But until you deal with that, it's going to affect everything in your life.
I agree. I mean, Danika, you are a millennial like myself, obviously very enlightened because you've come onto this path. What would you say has been your experience when it comes to ageism in coaching? Because I think if had I not mentioned that we were millennials, maybe somebody would have listened to this podcast and thought, two wise girls have something to offer the world. So what has been your experience so far when it comes to ageism?
I definitely think it's a factor with on the coaching side. Like I say, people do associate wisdom with age, and that is fairly normal and a good thing. But you've got to obviously when it comes to picking a coach, you need to do your own research. You need to look at their social media, their website, their setup, their reviews, all of that kind of thing. But I do think it does play a factor. I mean, if someone, say, in their 40s or 50s is looking for a life coach, um, 9 times out of 10, they might not go for someone in their late 20s, early 30s, even late 30s. So I do think it plays a factor. How big a factor it plays, I think we might never know as coaches because you're only going to know the people that approach you. But I do think it's a
Yeah.
thing and it is unfortunate. And like I said, I think it should be more based on, the person's experience as a coach, their setup, everything they have to offer, what you're actually looking for. But then again, it can also boil down to, unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that are scamming, that are not 100% qualified in what they're doing. So this is why I say it does come down to research and maybe even just getting in touch, having that discovery call. I mean, I offer discovery calls for that reason, where you're not being charged and you can just have like a 15-20 minute conversation as to what it is you're looking for in a coach, what goals you want to reach, or what triggers and traumas you want to overcome, all of that kind of thing. And I think if you have that call, you can understand that person as a coach a little bit more, see if they have what you are looking for, and maybe make a decision from there, as opposed to just booking and then feeling like you've possibly wasted your money or your time.
Yeah. But I mean, do you think maybe alongside budgeting for coffee or rain, something that's a necessity, personal development should also make it onto your budget at some point in your life?
I definitely think so. Like I say, with mental health, with goals, with life, with traumas, with everything. I mean, I don't see how it can't be a part of your monthly budgeting. I think it's a necessity. But then again, like some people would rather do something like that when they feel something big has happened in their life and then they want to deal with everything at once or start that journey then. So I think it really depends on the person, where they are in their life. I personally think the best time to start is when you're feeling stuck. I think a lot of people have reached that point in their life where, it's more you're just going with the flow kind of thing. Not
Yeah.
necessarily happy, maybe more on the bored side, don't really know what the next step is, kind of basically in a loop where nothing's really changing. I think that's a very good place to start, to see what your next steps could be, why you may be feeling stuck. I think that's a good place to start. But I do think that it doesn't have to be the most expensive thing. It's affordable if you find the right person. And you know, um, even if you're doing one session a month, I mean, there's people doing one session a week, one session a month, two sessions a month. It all depends what it is that you're looking to do, and then you can budget accordingly.
Yeah, I love when you were saying good place to start is when you're stuck, because I was like thinking, I'm like, was I stuck in my teens? And upon reflection, I was like, I actually was, because I was deciding what career to pursue. So I just remember feeling very torn in many directions, because I've always been very multifaceted. So it was like, should I do this? Should I do that? And then it was like, maybe you get to know yourself a bit better, and then it will come to me like which way I should go. But it's tough. That's when I realized, I think that's when I had that moment of deep introspection. And I think, I don't know, I was, high performing child. So I think I was very much in my do or die. I can't choose the wrong thing, because then that's the rest of my life. And, now I know that that's like very dramatic thinking, right? But back then it was thinking like, if I choose the wrong subject now, the rest of my life is ruined. So I
A
kind of
lot
have
of
to get it
pressure.
right. It's so much pressure. Now I'm just looking back and thinking that's like maybe not the best, but that's basically, that's your life experience and that's your life journey. That's where you find yourself. But I think the experience that I had was different, because it was coupled with, like I say, like spiritual elements. So yes, it's worrying about like what to do for the rest of your life, but then how do I answer this question? It is like, actually, let me get to know myself better, not, oh, I should go job shadow somebody. Like I was doing both simultaneously without necessarily knowing that's what I'm doing. And I'm always encouraging people to do that, because I think like all the people that I work with very good at like going to get the professional insight that they need to. I want to be a doctor, I'm going to shadow a doctor. I'm like, yes, but then you also need to have some sort of personal development element to your inquiry. Like maybe you then are going for like a confidence course, because then you're filling in the gaps. But it's a lot of responsibility for you to fill in those gaps for yourself, particularly if you're not around people that understand that that's important. And unfortunately, the world is not as enlightened. People are walking around thinking all is well, whereas it's like, no, your job is not your identity. So you have to work on your personal self alongside your professional self. So I don't know if you had views around people working on their personal styles and professional style simultaneously, and I don't know, maybe advice that you have for people when it comes to that.
I definitely think it's necessary, especially if you're in a toxic work environment, all those kinds of things, in order to be able to deal with that environment and understand the dynamics behind, possibly a person treating you bad in the workplace. A lot of people with anxiety or just normal empathy would start to, it would eat away at them and they'd start to think that they've done something wrong. But meantime, that person is just unhealed and projecting all of their either work problem, I mean, home problems on you, or their own insecurities or their own angers, or they're not where they want to be in life and they're jealous, so they're going to take it out on you. So I do think it's necessary. The world is not an easy place, and I think in order for us to be at our peak in both our personal and work life, it's necessary to have both.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think you've shared a lot of wisdom with us today, and I think there's definitely points that we could take away. But I wonder if you could salienate maybe a few points, maybe three. Doesn't have to be a lot. I hope three is not a lot. Whether it's reflection prompts or just something practical that people can take with them from this episode.
Try to think. Yeah, I think the main takeaway would be that, there doesn't have to be anything majorly wrong in order to look into life coaching. Maybe just become more aware of what it can offer you. And, these days, I think there is actually nothing better than self awareness and self development. It broadens everything for you in terms of work, in terms of your personal life, relationships, everything. So I think it is something to become more aware of and see, where it can help you in your life. You never know what doors it can open for you, what things you can overcome, with seeing a life coach. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can.
No, I think
It's
that
so
that's
it's when
beautifully
there's so
said.
much that you don't know like where to kind of start.
No, no, I think that it's succinct and it's beautiful because I think that being the main point, there doesn't need to be anything wrong. Because I think for the longest time with mental health, people heard mental health and thought this person is not okay. Whereas it's like, no, mental health is quite broad. And I think you basically categorized it quite well, where it's like, it's either it's the inner child trauma, it is your any lived experience, and then there is where there has been an actual a traumatic event that has transpired that then has an impact on you. So I think it's important for people to understand, are you on the preventative side, are you on the reactionary side, but you don't need to wait for something to happen to you. And in summary, something has happened to all of us. That is the reality of this world that we live in, yet people are still in denial of that. They don't believe in, intergenerational trauma, childhood trauma. Some people don't believe in any of that. They just think it's woo-woo and it can't be true. Whereas we need to first accept all of that as truth, and then only can we heal and really move forward as a society.
100%. I definitely agree with you.
Danica, thank you so much for your time and sharing your thoughts with us. I really think the audience will appreciate them because, as we know, these insights don't come for free. They're not cheap, and obviously for me, I definitely understand the value in it. So I'd never advocate for it being free. Although, of course, we're trying to structure Seize the Light in a way that we can give it to people that really cannot afford it at a discount or at free at the very least, because we do think it's important that everybody gets access to this knowledge, because that's how we start collectively healing. So where can people find you?
So my Instagram page is Coachology, and then my website is also www at coachology.co.za, and I can also leave the information. I'll put it there for everyone to see, just because they might not
Yep.
get the spelling correct. But yes, I do have the website and
We'll
the
have
Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, we'll definitely include it in the description. And I think now is a good time to also mention that your client base is international, so you've got no geographical limitations. So I just have to plug you there and mention that part.
Thank you so much. Yes, because I do in person and online. So obviously, anywhere in the world, we do the online sessions. So that will not be an issue.
I love that. Well, Danica, thank you so much for your time today. It's really been great to have this exchange with you and for you to share your insights with us. I hope that for those that have listened to the episode, they've managed to take something away from it. But as I say, for me, I think the main point being, like, in mental health, it doesn't always mean there's something wrong. I think it's important to identify which category you're in and act accordingly. But it's imperative for us as a society. Collective healing is a necessity. Thanks to everyone who's listened to this episode of the Lantern Podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.